Okay, folks, I'm going to be reading The Singing Tree, and I'm going to be on chapter 7, and it's called Six Big Russians. Haying was a grueling job, even with strong men for help. With only women, old men, and boys of his own age to work with, Jancy had all he could to get the hay into the barns. Then before he knew it, harvesting was on his hands, and later corn cutting and potato digging. Days took on wings and flew away, and he had no time to watch their flight. Nobody had, and nobody wanted to. Time was something to be pushed ahead. Hurry, hurry, hurry. People seemed to say to each other, hurry, for then tomorrow would come, and tomorrow night might bring the end of the war. But as the seasons rolled by and the sun rose on a brand new day every dawn, it was never the tomorrow they were all praying for. Each day brought news, a seesaw of news, good and bad. Everybody had learned the sinister lingo of war: offensive campaign, trench, submarine, airplane, bombs, gas. Dots on the map of Europe with strange names such as Przemysl, Ypres, Brest-Litovsk, Paris, and later Isonzo. For Italy had been sucked into the war too. Had become real places where guns threatened husbands and sons. Merely names before, now the very sound of them was a threat to everyone. Mail came every day to the remote village now, and the very color of the cards and envelopes handed out by Uncle Moses meant joy or grief for someone. A pink card placed into a trembling hand. He is all right, thank God, he wrote it himself. A travel-worn, often sealed envelope with the double-headed Russian eagle on it. He is a prisoner, thank the Lord. The large white envelope, heavy with someone's small possessions who would never come back, and a woman would bow her head and go away weeping. There was no glory in this war. News of victories was not proclaimed with brass bands and flags flying. Only mute, anxious eyes of helpless women and children asking, what price, O Lord, what price for victory? There were 2 growing stacks of pink cards in Mother's bureau drawer, between the prayer books and the Bible, and a few travel-worn, many sealed envelopes from Russia. She would bring them out to the kitchen every night, and the 4 of them would read every one over and over again. They were all much the same, saying very little about the war, but reading them aloud would bring the 3 men closer. It was toward the end of the second year in November 1915 that 2 cards from Father came on the same day. The first said, don't be alarmed if you don't hear from me for a while. A bad storm is blowing up and it might wash out the roads. Read Jancy for the second time. He glanced up at Mother, ready to voice what seemed to him an explanation of this strange statement, that this storm was going to be one of those offensive drives. But Mother was smiling. He'll catch cold, that baby. I bet he never remembers to change his clothes if he gets soaked. So Jancy didn't say anything, just picked up the second card. This is a funny one. It says, Dear Jancy, remember to put up enough sausages for Kate. Have you still got the key? Sausages, he grumbled. Where will I get anyone to butcher? What key? Mother interrupted. You are just like your father, Jancy. You never tell me anything. Jancy was already in the room and came back brandishing a key. This, he made me lock up the book, and I have forgotten all about it. They bent over the open book. As they began to read the closely written pages, their heads pressed together, and there was no sound for a long time but the rustle of turning leaves and the ticking of the cuckoo clock, and once in a while the gentle splash of a tear falling on paper. But when Jancy turned the last written page and looked up, his eyes weren't wet. They were shining with a light much brighter than the light of the candle. Why, Mother, he never left us at all. He has been here all this time and we didn't know it. Look, Mother, oh, Mother, he wrote us something for every day for almost a year ahead for all of us. And, Mother, I did all he wanted me to do, the harvest, the corn, the sheep, we all did. He thought of everything, whispered Mother, her finger on a page beginning with November 1915. Get old Janus Vidor to butcher the pigs. Oh, Martin, she straightened, gazing through the window into the night. Your son asked a question and you answered from across the miles. If you can hear us, Martin, listen, be careful of that storm. Oh, be so careful. And here's a picture of her and Jancy. So she knew, thought Jancy. Under that gentle smile, she was hiding the same fear, smiling so we wouldn't be frightened. Just as she was smiling when I came home without him, and she said, I know, Jancy, he kissed us goodbye. So women were not all that gentle, helpless, soft either. They too had a steel armor that would not let them show the tears inside. The last shred of harsh, small, boyish pride in the new manhood left Jancy then. He was all man now, bowing his head to the strength of a woman. He bent over the book again. He says here, October, plow up some of the pastures for spring's planting of more corn and potatoes. Ask Uncle Moses to make out an application for Russian prisoners if necessary. Jancy looked up. We could still do that plowing. Would you mind feeding prisoners, Mother? Why should I mind? They are men, like ours. Maybe. If we are good to them, they'll write home too, like Sandor, and say that we are kind, and maybe some Russian women will say to their husband or son, don't aim your gun too well, they are just simple people like we are. All right, Mother, how many can you feed? As many as you need, Jancy. It will be nice to cook again, big cauldrons full of stew, and bake large round loaves of bread. It'll fill up the time and keep me from thinking too much. Barely 2 weeks later, Uncle Moses told Jancy that 6 prisoners would arrive the next day. Here is your approved application, he said. The guard will bring them here. Come with the wagon tomorrow afternoon to take them home. An uneasy thought assailed Jancy. How in the world will I talk to them? They'll learn fast, smiled Uncle Moses. A plow looks like a plow the world over. So does a horse. And I speak Russian, Jancy. If you get in a tight spot, just come to Uncle Moses. Jancy smiled wryly. That's all I do, it seems. So does everyone else in the village. No money, go to Uncle Moses. Can't read or write, Uncle Moses will do it. Sick? Uncle Moses will find a remedy. Want to bawl like a calf? He pointed to himself. Uncle Moses has a good shoulder to bawl on. We seem to pack up all our troubles and dump them on your doorstep. Well, Jancy, it's give and take that makes the world go round. I am paying a debt. We Jews are. He glanced at Jancy and, seeing the question on his face, went on. Your great-grandfather and others in his time reached down into the dark despair we Jews had fallen into and lifted us up, made Hungarians out of us, given us a place in the sun. They didn't need us then. Now you do, and now we pay gladly. Joseph, his voice hesitated for a moment, then grew stronger than before. Joseph, my firstborn son, gave all he had, but I am proud, Jancy, proud that he was allowed to. A little silence fell on both of them. Then Uncle Moses said briskly, Tomorrow afternoon, Jancy, and bring in a few baskets of eggs. I can sell them at a good profit. Next day, before Jancy left, he and Kate had a row. Kate was not going to let Jancy take her eggs. She was going along. Jancy argued and pleaded. He yelled at her. He tried to pull her off the wagon, but she had entrenched herself between the baskets, and all he got for trying was a kick in the arm. Mother and Lily came running out of the house. Jancy, nursing his arm, turned to Mother. You tell her that she can't ride home with 6 prisoners in the wagon. It'll be dark before we get home. Mother looked at Kate, but she only settled herself more firmly between the baskets and shook her head. He can't boss me around. I'm going. But, Lamb, he is right. It isn't proper for a girl. You can go some other time. It was no good. I am going, was all Kate said. Then both Mother and Jancy began to scold, and even Lily put in a word or two, forthright words at that. You are just plain cussed, that's what you are. What do you want to go so almighty bad for just exactly today? What's that? She asked curiously, as Kate, stubbornly pulling her jacket tighter around her, revealed a large, flat package, thus far hidden under her apron. None of your business, nosy, flashed Kate, but suddenly changed her mind. All right, if he hadn't hollered at me, I would have told anyway. She held up the package. It was a large photograph of her father, and she had in her room. I thought I wanted to see the prisoners right away. Maybe one of them had seen Daddy in Russia. So there, and I'm going. Of course you are, Lamb, said Mother. Lily, go get your jacket too. You are going with Kate. Jancy groaned. Let's call the dogs and the chickens and take the cow, just to make it complete. Mother gave him one look, and he hung his head. Oh, all right, I'm sorry. He thawed out on the drive, though, and admitted this was better than going alone. The prisoners were already there when they arrived. Jancy, with a horseman's expert eye, saw that they had good, strong frames. Needed filling out, though, he thought. 6 husky, placid-faced, blue-eyed blonde Russians standing in a row eyed Jancy while he spoke to the guard who had brought them. The guard, a sullen man, looked up from the slip of paper Jancy handed them. Where is this Janos Nagy who takes the prisoners? I am Janos Nagy, said Jancy. The guard began to laugh. Go wipe your nose, sonny. Where is your father? I have no time for jokes. Jancy faced them. He didn't seem angry, but his neck was set very straight in his shoulders. His arms moved back a little, ending in clenched fists. My father is in the war, and I am doing his job. Take that back about my nose, or I'll make you worry about your own. Well, I'll be. The guard drew in his breath in surprise, eyeing Jancy, and I believe you would too, he decided, and began to laugh. All right, young man, I take it back. He shrugged, handing Jancy a small, flat key. From now on, you are responsible, not I. So long. He mounted his waiting horse and rode away, leaving Jancy with a small key he didn't know what to do with, and 6 strange giants he didn't know what to do with either. Here's a picture of Jancy with the 6 guys. He looked at the key, wondering when one of the prisoners grunted and 5 pairs of arms shot forward, chained together. Oh, the nasty brute, Kate found her voice. Take those chains off of them this minute, Jancy Nagy. The very idea. Uncle Moses had stepped out of the store, and he looked worried, but he gave Jancy a smile. I thought you could handle that fellow alone, but I was watching. Now that he is gone, bring the men into the store. I want to talk to you. Jancy was already fumbling with the lock on the chain, and when it dropped into the dust, 6 pairs of blue eyes smiled at him, and one prisoner poked a blunt finger at his chest. Comrade, eh? Friend. Jancy nodded. Sure, friend. Then Uncle Moses spoke to them in Russian, and their faces lighted up still more. The 6 of them began to speak at once, surrounding the old man eagerly. After a while, Uncle Moses emerged from the tight ring of blond giants around him. They like you, Jancy. They say you must be a good farmer. The horses are so shiny. Cheerful as he sounded, his mind seemed to be on something else. He peered nervously up and down the long street. Well, let's go inside, he said, and herded the men ahead of him. The girls and Jancy followed. Uncle Moses locked the door, then stood undecided, rubbing the end of his nose, peering now at Jancy, then at the prisoners. You didn't see any gendarmes on the way, or did you, Jancy? No. Why? This is a fine mess. I just don't know what to do, sighed Uncle Moses. Peter deserted, and the gendarmes are after him. I saw them. They say he was heading for home when last seen. Deserted, breathed Jancy, and Kate and Lily drew closer. Why? They all knew that deserters were punished. It was the worst thing a soldier could do. Because old Vitter wrote him a letter and told him that Mary had a baby and she isn't well. A foolish thing to do, worry a man about something he can't do anything about. Poor Peter, he is almost crazy. So Peter and Mary, the ones that had the wedding, Peter left the war and deserted. How do you know? Asked Jancy, staring at Uncle Moses. Because he is here, sighed the old man, casting a glance at the small door in the rear. The 6 prisoners sat immobile on the boxes and crates, great hands spread on much-mended knees, looking uncomprehending but content from one speaker to another. Somehow, perhaps he didn't know what to say, Jancy smiled at them, and 6 broad smiles answered. Peter, said one of them, pointing to himself. Grigory, Stana, Nikolai, Sergei, and again, Peter. He pointed out one after another, then he held up 2 fingers. Peter, Peter, and he grinned. Jancy nodded. Jancy, he said, tapping his chest. Then he turned to Uncle Moses. They think we are talking about one of them. What will you do about Peter? What will you do about our Peter? All he wants to do is see Mary and the baby. If I could get someone to drive him home. But every wagon going toward his home will be searched tonight. Every road watched. And if they find him there, it's court-martial for both of us. They looked at each other helplessly. Suddenly, Kate exclaimed, I have an idea. Listen, Lily and I will take the wagon, get Mary and the baby, and come back here. Then we'll hide Peter under our skirts and go home. They wouldn't watch wagons going to our farm. Why should they? How about these? Asked Jancy. Will they fly home or what? Oh, said Kate, deflated, staring at the prisoners. I forgot about them. Grigory, Stana, Nikolai, Sergei, and the 2 Peters beamed at her. Oh, Dushinka. Why don't you tell them, Uncle Moses, said Lily. Look at them. They are nice. Let's do what Kate said. Then we can all drive home, prisoners and all. Her voice grew more and more eager, and then she burst out laughing. Those gendarmes wouldn't even dream that Kate, Mary, the baby, Lily, Jancy, Grigory, Nikolai, Stana, Sergei, and 2 Peters aren't sitting on top of the 3rd one. Jancy sat up straight. Not bad, you know. I'm beginning to believe that you 2 have brains. What do you say, Uncle Moses? Uncle Moses was rubbing his nose in earnest, and that meant that he was thinking hard. If we can get away with it, Peter could steal away, back to the front, much easier from your farm. They only watch soldiers coming away. Going back, he could join all the others. Jancy, it's an awful risk, but somebody left another pack of trouble on your doorstep, and this time we are going to cart it away, said Jancy resolutely. Kate and Lily jumped up. Let's go. My eggs, cried Uncle Moses, and he spoke rapidly to the Russians and unlocked the door. The 6 giants goose-filed out and came back, each carrying a basket of eggs. Jacques, Nikolai sighed, caressing the basket with his eye. Give them some, Uncle Moses. They look hungry, said Kate from the door. And here, you ask them. Ask them if they have seen Daddy. Then the wagon rattled away. Uncle Moses locked the door again. He tapped lightly on the rear door, and after a moment, Aunt Sarah emerged. How is he? Said Uncle Moses. Asleep, she smiled. He was starved and dead on his feet, 10 days since he had warm food or more than a few minutes' rest, hunted like a poor rabbit. She broke off as she became aware of the big, shadowy shapes. It's all right, Mama. Jancy's prisoners. 6 more for you to feed, if you can manage. She only nodded, smiling reassurance, and was gone. Uncle Moses began to speak to the prisoners. As he talked and they began to understand what was happening, those broad, placid faces became windows through which Jancy could see their thoughts. First slow comprehension tinged with amusement, then compassion, and finally approval and admiration. They smiled at him. They nodded vigorously, repeating, Comrade, comrade. To Uncle Moses they talked eagerly, once in a while touching his hand, his arm, with clumsy but gentle appeals for more attention. Uncle Moses translated small shreds of the stories they were pouring into his ears. Grigory has a baby daughter he has not seen yet. Nikolai has a small farm and 10 children. Sergei says you were a brave boy, Jancy. He has one about your age. No, none of them knew Kate's father. Of course not. They haven't been home since the war began. All talk ceased suddenly as Aunt Sarah appeared with a huge steaming pot and a handful of spoons. Ho! The Russians grunted as one man and fell to, not waiting for the forthcoming plates, kneeling on the floor around the pot. Musiks, small farmers, all of them. They don't know what it's all about. They only want to go home, sighed Uncle Moses. Night was falling. The little store was dark when the wagon pulled up and Kate pounded on the door. Hurry, she panted, slipping inside. The gendarmes, and I guess that must be the policemen, are searching the houses up above. They stopped us both coming and going, but they don't know who Mary is. We brought the cow, too. She wouldn't leave the brown cow. For a moment, her gay smile rested on Jancy, and then, hurry, please. Jancy gasped when Uncle Moses led the staggering, trembling Peter from the storeroom. This hollow-eyed, shivering wreck with the unkempt beard. Could this be Peter? The Russians surrounded and almost carried him to the wagon. Mary was sobbing softly, but she didn't cry out. Lily took the baby from her, and Mary cradled her husband's head on her lap. One by one, Grigory, Stana, Nikolai, Sergei, and the 2 Peters climbed in, hiding the 3rd Peter completely. Jancy threw a horse blanket over their knees, then jumped up to the seat. God bless you, children, said Uncle Moses hoarsely as the wagon moved away. They traveled slowly because of Mary's cow tied behind. At the beginning of the lane, one of the horses snorted, and an answering snort came from behind the trees. A moment later, a voice said, "Stop!" and 2 gendarmes rode into the light cast by the wagon lanterns. "Where are you going?" demanded one of them. "Home," said Jancy quietly, although his heart was pounding in his throat. He fished a piece of paper out of his pocket. "Here, government order. I am taking prisoners home for field work." 6 prisoners, Janos Nagy, the gendarme mumbled. "That seems to be an order. The big ranch we have just come from." He jerked a thumb behind him as an explanation to his partner, and he returned the paper to Jancy. "Your mother said you'd be along with them and 2 girls. His eyes explored the wagon casually. Jancy forestalled a question. "We are taking Mary Vidor and her baby home. She is sick. Her husband is in the war." "You, Mary Vidor?" asked the gendarme, peering at Mary. She nodded, tears streaming down her deathly pale face. The stern eyes of the gendarme softened. "Don't worry, sister. He'll be home before you know it. Little tyke." He smiled at the baby, tickling her under the chin until she gurgled. "Does he know about this?" He winked at Mary. She, almost fainting with terror, lest Peter make a move, began to sob. "Don't cry, sister. We are all in the same mess," the gendarme grunted. "We have to hunt for a man tonight. God forgive us. I don't want to find him, but orders is orders. He deserted to see his wife. Peter Hody. You know him?" He turned to Jancy. "Sure, but he lives 3 miles on the other side of the village." "I know. Those roads are watched, and if he tries—" Something like a groan escaped him. "Son, it's a crazy world when it's a man's duty to kill and a sin to comfort his wife." "Well," he sighed, "go on home." And here's a picture of all of them in the wagon together. The shadows swallowed him up, and Jancy clucked to the horses. He felt weak, and his teeth were chattering now that the danger was over. Behind him, a soft Russian voice broke through the silence. "Comrade." He turned around, but Grigory wasn't talking to him. He was holding out his big arms for Mary's baby, and she gave it to him. Grigory began to croon. Then Stana, Nikolai, Sergei, and the 2 Peters began to hum too. And the wagon swayed on homeward, with 6 big Russians singing a lullaby to a small Hungarian baby. And that is the end of chapter 7.